All right, we're going to continue in the Lucid Word, insha'Allah ta'ala. We are on the chapter of Zakah, or we're in the book of Zakah. We say the book of Zakah. You know that means that's one of the chapters of fiqh. Yani, we're going back and forth between the word book and chapter. We're using them interchangeably sometimes. So you have a book of fiqh, fiqh being jurisprudence, if you want, or rules, judgments, practical rules. So a book of fiqh has books in it. The book of purification, the book of prayer, the book of zakat, etc. So we're in the book of zakat, and this is where we're going to start today. The author says, among the rules, meaning one of the rules that pertain to staple crops, is that crops of the same year are combined to determine if the quotum is reached, provided that they are of the same kind and that they were harvested within 1 year of each other. In which case, zakat is due if the sum of both harvests complete the quotum, even if they differ in type. What this means is, what if you were a farmer and you had one type of rice on one field and another type of rice on another field? And so your one field with one type of rice, you did the harvest for it, and it didn't come up to 5 wesks so that you'd be obligated to pay zakat. And then the other field with the different type of rice, you did the harvest for it, and it also didn't come up to 5 wesks so that you'd have to pay zakat. But if you combine them, they do reach 5 wesks or more, then you will have to pay zakat because they were harvested in the same year and they are the same kind. Even if they're different species, says here type. Even if they're the same, even if they're different types. But because they're both rice, then you put them together, and if you reach the minimum that you need to pay zakat, then you're going to pay your zakat. I think that's clear, insha'Allah ta'ala. I'll remind you here, digression, when it comes to the rules of riba in sales. Riba in sales pertain to selling food for food. So you can't sell one type of rice for another type unless you exchange at the same time and they are equal on both sides. Why I'm mentioning that for you? To remind you that because they're both rice, even if it's different species of rice. Same thing for any other kind of food, and same thing for gold and silver when it comes to riba. But back to zakat here. However, crops of a different kind are not combined to complete the quotum, such as barley and wheat. So if a person has barley and wheat, each being less than 5 wesks, there is no obligation on that person to pay zakat, even if the sum of both would be 5 wesks, because they are two different kinds, and one may not be added to the other to complete the quotum. This is unlike the case of two types of the same kind of crop, such as Levantine wheat and Egyptian wheat, whereas both amounts are calculated together to complete the quotum. Yes. That's what we already said. So if you have a question here, go ahead and ask, please. See who's in. Ahlan wa sahlan. Brother Tariq. Ahlan wa sahlan. I don't know if you're a Tariq that I know. There's so many Tariqs. May Allah have mercy on all of you. Amin. The author says zakat on dates and raisins is due is due once the fruit ripens, even if only one grape or date acquires ripeness. All right, so now what the author wants to talk about is, when does the zakat actually become linked to your crops? So you're a farmer and you're growing your wheat or rice, or you have your grapevines, or you have your palm trees that grow fruits. So there's a stage when they first start budding that nobody's going to eat them. You need to let them finish. You need to let them complete their process. So before they become ripe, there's no zakat on them because nobody wants them yet. Not usually. Yani that's general statement when I say nobody wants them yet. But then once a single date becomes ripe out of all of your crops, and once a single grape turns into a raisin out of all of your crops, and Shaykh is going to say, once a single grain gets hard out of all of your grains, then the zakat is going to link to your entire crop. Now you have to let them finish, and you can't sell them. It's like you have a frozen asset here. You let them finish, then you do your harvest, and then you separate whatever you need to pay for zakat if you do, and then you can do what you want to do with the rest. Unless you get a professional who can estimate for you how much you're going to have to pay for zakat ahead of time. He can estimate for you ahead of time how much you're going to have to pay for zakat. You're allowed to do that. Then when he makes his assessment for you, then you're going to pay that. That's what you're going to have to pay for zakat. And then you can do what you want to do with your stuff, with your crops, before you finish the harvest. So, yeah, wa alaikum assalam.
A question about that. Now, you get the professional, knows the rules and everything, and you make a prediction or estimate, and you go and try to sell your crops now, but they go bad. Is that a loss for me? He said something's going to happen, and it didn't happen. It's a loss for me. Now they paid for the zakat for that harvest.
I haven't heard about this. I don't have anything.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the Shaykh says, zakat on dates and raisins is due once the fruit ripens, even if only one grape or date acquires ripeness. So that's clear for you. When it says here, it's due on them, it's due once the fruit ripens. That sentence means once a single fruit in all of your crop ripens, then your crop becomes a frozen asset, the whole crop. Then you have to let it finish. And then you do your harvest, and then you separate whatever you need to pay for zakat, if so, and then you can do what you want to do. The fruit's ripeness is determined by the appearance of certain properties, wherein it is normally sought for consumption. Yani, when it becomes ripe, that means when people want to eat it, usually. How would you know? So if you're a farmer, you'd know. And if you're a student of knowledge, you'd know even if you're not a farmer, because the religion teaches you. Such as change in color regarding grapes that undergo color changes, or else other indicators of maturity. And zakat is also due on staple crops when the grain hardens. So same thing. Although zakat is due when the aforementioned occurs, it is not valid to offer it as zakat until after the dates have dried and the grapevine berries become raisins and the wheat has been separated from its spikes, etc. So that's what I already told you. And when I said to you If you're a farmer, you would know. And if you're a student of knowledge, you'd know even if you're not a farmer, because like some of the people of knowledge said, the knowledge of fiqh gives you experience before experience. It gives you experience before experience. When you learn zakat, when you learn fiqh, when you learn fiqh, you learn about all sorts of things, many, many kinds of things, all sorts of aspects of life. That's why if the slave of God had only Islam and he didn't have anything else, then this is sufficient. If a slave of God had all of the world and he didn't have Islam, then it's like he's poor. And if you only had Islam and you didn't have anything else, then this is sufficient. 1/10 is due on the dates, raisins, and grains that are watered without expense or significant work. So 1/10 is due on your crops that you don't have to pay for irrigating or to irrigate. You don't have to pay to irrigate these crops. So you have to pay 1/10. So what this means is you're going to do your harvest and you're going to see if you've got 5 wessex. So if you have 5 wessex or more, whatever is more than those 5 wessex goes into the calculation. Then you're going to have to pay 1/10 of your crop. 1/10 of your crop. That means divide your crop into 10 equal parts, and one of those 10s, you're going to give it away in zakat. And half of that, half of 1/10, which is 1/20th, is due on the grains, dates, and raisins that are irrigated with an expense or work. So even less. If you pay to irrigate your crops, such as if they were irrigated with water transported on animals from its source to the crops, that's like you pay for it. Or by using a water wheel turned by animals. Or Noria wheel, I hope I'm saying that right. Or a water pump. Yeah, you know, like you pay a water bill basically to irrigate your crops. In this case, you're going to have to pay half of that first amount we mentioned, which is 1/20th. So that means you're going to take your crops, split them into 20 equal parts, and give away one of those 20. So in such a case, if you were going to pay 1/10, then if you had 300 saw, then you're going to pay 30 saw, and then you keep the rest. And if you're going to pay 1/20th, then if you had 300 saw, you're going to pay 15 saw for zakat. What's saw, to remind you? One saw is 4 muds. And I'm going to repeat my approximation for you also. So 1 mud is 2 average hands of a man cupped together. So let's now call that a bowl. So 1 mud, I'm going to call it a bowl. That's 2 hands cupped together. Now, 4 of these bowls make 1 saw. So 1 saw is going to be a pitcher, approximately here. Even pitchers have different sizes, so I'm only approximating for you, just so you can have something to imagine. So you're a farmer, and you have these grains. So then you took 4 bowls that I quantified for you. You put them in one container. That one container, which is going to be like a big cup or a pitcher, that's a saw. So if you have 300 saw, then if you don't have to pay for irrigation, you're only going to have to pay 30 saw. And if you do have to pay for irrigation, then out of 300 saw, you're only going to have to pay 15. If this math is not clear for you, it means you just need to study some basic math. Some division. You need to study some division. Yani, study some fractions or some decimals. Do zakah on what exceeds the aforementioned quotum is paid proportionately. Even if the surplus were a small amount, even if the surplus were a small amount. What this means is, like we said, when it comes to the money other than animals, you don't jump to different numbers. There's a number. Once you get to that number, then you're going to have to pay zakat, and everything over that goes into the calculation. But when it comes to animals, it doesn't go like that, because you can't divide animals like you can divide other types of money. So when it comes to animals, like camels, you need to have a certain minimum, 5 camels. And then after that, 10 camels. And everything between 5 and 10 is like you have 5. Yani, 6, 7, 8, and 9 is like you have 5. Then if you have 10 camels, you have to pay something else. And if you have 11, 12, 13, or 14, it's like you have 10, etc. That's how it goes with the animals. The numbers jump. But when it comes to the grains and the fruits and the gold and the silver, the numbers don't jump, because you're able to divide this money more precisely. That's why it says here, do zakat on what exceeds the aforementioned quotum is paid proportionately, even if the surplus were a small amount. Surplus means extra. Because exemption between set quotums does not apply here, as it does with regards to livestock, as was previously mentioned. So I think that's clear. And if you have a question, go ahead, please. No zakat is due on crops, dates, and raisins below the quotum, which is 5 wessex. 5 wessex, that's your 300 saw. So your saw is that pitcher. Now get 300 of those pitchers. So you're going to have yourself maybe a barrel. Then you need to pay zakat. Not on the whole barrel. If you get that barrel, if that barrel is 5 wessex, then that means you've reached the amount that makes you obligated to pay zakat. Then you look. Do you have to pay for irrigation or not? Do you have a water bill for your crops or not? If you do, then you have to pay 1/10 of that. 1/20th of that. If you do, then you have to pay 1/20th of that. If you don't, then you have to pay 1/10 of it. However, one may make a voluntary payment. And this detail here is very helpful, which is to remember that paying zakat is a religious obligation, just like performing the prayer. So don't think that you can just give as much as you want. You can't give as much as you want. You can only give as much as the religion said. Just like the prayer, the obligatory prayer. What if you felt in your heart you want to pray 50 rakats? So you can't say, I'm going to pray Dhuhr 50 rakats right now. That's completely invalid. You can only do dhuhr as 4 rak'ats, and you have no choice here. If you want to do more, then you finish your dhuhr prayer and then stand up to do some sunnah prayer. But you have to offer the prayer as it was prescribed. Same thing for the zakat. You have to offer it as it was prescribed. But if you want to offer something extra, then you can. Yani, that means with a different intention. So you say, for example, this is my zakat. Anything above the amount, anything above the obligatory amount is a charity, an optional charity, and then that's valid. The quotum of gold is 20 mithqals. Footnote here. A mithqal is a measure of weight which equals the weight of a golden dinar, i.e. approximately 4.25 grams. Yeah. So this might be confusing for a person here. A mithqal, because it could be said, a mithqal is a dinar. Dinar is a golden coin. A mithqal is a dinar, but really the dinar is the money, is the coin, and the mithqal is the measure. The mithqal is the weight of this dinar. So the quotum of gold is 20 mithqals. And then in some of the books, it would be said, and 20 mithqals is 20 dinars. So then somebody might say, so a mithqal is a dinar. So the mithqal is the weight. And in fact, look at the root letters here of mithqal. Tha, qaf, lam. Thiqal. Thiqal means heaviness. Okay. So what is a mithqal? A mithqal is the weight of 72 average size unpeeled grains of barley from Al-Hijaz, which have had the long and narrow part of their ends cut off. What that means is, all right, here you're learning about zakat, and you're learning about zakat in crops and zakat in bullion, that's gold or silver. And the source of this information is from the Arabic language, now being translated into English and translated into any other language you're going to teach in Spanish or Chinese or any other language. And different languages and different cultures, they don't use the same measures. Like in Australia, they have a measure called a stone. So I don't know how much a stone is. So here we're talking about a measure called a mithqal. How much is a mithqal? And the Americans, they use a measure called a pound. How much is a pound? So sometimes you don't know how much a measure is because different cultures have different measures. So how much is a mithqal? One mithqal. One mithqal is the weight of 72 average unpeeled barley grains from Hijaz, Hijazi barley grains with their tips cut off. So you have the grain, and then there's like a stem on each side of the grain. So clip off the stem from each side, leave the husk, leave the peel or the husk on the grain, and don't get a small grain and don't get a big grain. So average sized unpeeled barley grains from Hijaz with the tips clipped off of the ends. 72 of those is one mithqal. So 20 mithqals, so, in other words, 72 of those, that's how much a dinar weighs. That's the weight of a dinar in gold. Yani a golden dinar. So if you have 20 mithqals of gold, then you have reached the minimum amount that makes you obligated to pay zakat. How much you're going to pay, we didn't say yet. But we're saying now, this is the minimum you have to be obligated to pay zakat. And to remind you, if you have jewelry, does jewelry have to be added to all of your gold? You have gold and jewelry. And you're weighing all of your, you have gold, and amongst your gold is jewelry. And now you're weighing your gold that you've had for a year to see if you have 20 mithqals, and therefore you're going to have to pay zakat. So do you have to add your jewelry to this measure? So if it's haram jewelry, then yes, you do. If it's haram jewelry, then yes, you do. Haram jewelry is like golden jewelry for a man. All golden jewelry for men is haram because men cannot wear gold. It's haram. So if you had a big, fat ring, a man's ring, or you used to be a rapper back in the 80s and you have a big, fat, golden rope necklace for a man, it's haram. Then you need to add that to your gold. See if you reached the minimum amount of 20 mithqals. But if you have permissible jewelry, like a woman's golden jewelry, then the scholars differed about whether that is exempted or you have to add it to your gold to see if you have the minimum. The strong saying, according to our Shaykh, is that the permissible jewelry also needs to be added to the calculation. So if a woman has some rings or bracelets or like that, she's going to add all of that to any other gold she has. If she has some golden coins, then she adds that. And if she has a minimum of 20 mithqals, or even more than that, if she has at least 20 mithqals, then she's going to have to pay zakat on her gold, or for having gold. What you got to pay, we didn't talk about it yet. And the quotum of silver is 200 dirhams. The dirham is a silver coin. Now, for extra clarity, this golden coin and silver coin we're talking about, first ones who are familiar with what we're saying is going to be the Arabs, like the old Arabs in particular. But other people had golden and silver coins too. It doesn't mean that they had the same measure. So the Arabs knew what a mithqal was and what a dirham was. And Arabs were not the only people who had, the Arabs knew what a dinar was and what a dirham was, golden coin and silver coin. But they're not the only people who had golden coins and silver coins. Chinese had that, and other people had that. So, just for your information. What's most important here is understanding the measurements. He said, is that for every single year or one-time payment? Let me ask, inshallah. I don't know the answer. Because your question means you're saying, all right, all this gold, I have all this gold here. And I even still have my fat rope from when I used to be a rapper. So then I weighed it all and I paid the zakat. But I still have this fat rope golden chain from when I was a rapper. Do I have to weigh it again next year? That's the meaning of your question, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to ask, inshallah. Nah. And the quotum of silver is 200 dirhams. 1 dirham is the weight of 50 average size grains of barley, plus 2/5 of 1 barley grain. 50 average size grains of barley and 2/5 of a grain. 50 grains and 2/5 of a grain. That means you get your 50 grains, then you get 1 grain, split it into 5 pieces, and take 2 of those 5 and put it with those 50. Now, these numbers here, 72 average size unpeeled grains of barley from Hijaz, which have the long and narrow part of their ends cut off, and 50 average size grains of barley plus 2/5 of 1 barley grain. This measurement here, are you expected to know this, to memorize this? Well, if you have gold or silver, it's your obligation to learn the rules of Zakat. That's one thing. And 2, if you are a student of knowledge or a scholar, then you need to know that, because that's part of the basic knowledge there. So if you were a serious student, let's say if you had a teacher and your teacher gives you tests, then this is going to come on the test. How much is a mithqal and how much is a dirham? And then you have to write it all out, what that is, which means you're going to have to memorize it so that you can come to the test and write it down on the paper. 1/40th is due on both gold and silver if they reach the quota. 1/40th. So that means if you had 20 mithqals of gold, so you reach the minimum that makes you obligated to pay zakat, split it into 40 parts and give away one of those 40 and keep the rest. And if you had the 200 dirhams of silver, split it into 40 parts, give one of those 40 away, and keep the rest. The surplus beyond the quotum is calculated proportionately, even if the excess amount were a small amount, as previously mentioned for agricultural goods. Yani, like we said about crops. It is a requirement that 1 year of ownership elapses on them after reaching the quota. However, zakat on gold and silver extracted from ore or taken from treasure trove, which have reached the specified quota, must be paid immediately. Let me back up. He says, it is a requirement that 1 year of ownership elapses on them after reaching the quota. Okay. That's clear for you. That means you got to reach the quotum first and then have that same gold for a whole year. It's not like the crops. Crops is you're going to do your harvest, and if you reach the quotum, you're going to pay the zakat. Gold and silver is you got to reach the minimum quota, and if you did, then that very same gold, you have to have it for a whole year. And then you're going to have to pay the zakat after that. Okay. But this rule is not for all of the bullion. Some of the bullion have different judgment. It's now what the Shaykh wants to talk about. He said, however, zakat on gold and silver extracted from ore. So I don't know if that's translated right. Extracted from the mine. It is the ore. Golden or silver ore that's extracted from the mine. Let me look up this word ore real quick. Ore, the compound of a metal and some other substance. It says, as oxygen, sulfur, or carbon, called its mineralizer, by which its properties are disguised or lost. Metals found free from such combination and exhibiting naturally their appropriate character are not called ores, but native metals. Interesting. Native metal. So I don't even know something there. It's fine. So let's just say you took the gold or silver from the mine, right out of the ground, right out of the mountain, for example. Then this has its own judgment. Or gold or silver taken from treasure trove. Treasure trove means basically a buried treasure, which have reached the specified quotum must be paid immediately. So you mined gold or silver, and when you finished mining, you had 20 mithqals of gold and you had 500 dirhams of silver. You don't wait for a year, you pay it immediately after you clean it. And this treasure trove, yani, you had your shovel and you dug down into the ground and then you hit a hard box and you said, what's this? And then you pulled out a box and opened it, and lo and behold, it's a box full of gold and silver that was buried before Prophet Muhammad was sent, alayhi salatu wassalam. And then you measured it and you found that you had 20 mithqals of gold or 500 dirhams of silver. Then you have to pay your zakat immediately. You don't wait for a year. It's not a requirement for a year to lapse in these two cases. Although they are offered after the ore has been cleansed from soil, yes. And the amount due for the mined materials differs from that which is required to be paid on treasure trove. Yani, treasure trove also has its own judgment, which is that you have to pay 1/5. The gold or silver that you mine has the same measure and the same distribution as the other gold and silver. 1/40th. 1/40th is paid on the mined materials, as in other forms of zakat on gold and silver. Whereas 1/5 is due on the treasure trove, which is much more. So that means you're going to split that treasure, let's say all of it was gold, into 5 parts and give away one of them and keep the rest. This is due to the work and expense of purifying the ore from soil, which is not incurred on treasure trove. Meaning, why are you going to pay more if you found a treasure? Because you didn't do any work. All you did was discover it. So now we want to talk about the zakat of the trader. And this case is an extension of zakat of gold and silver. Because you're going to be paying gold or silver. You're not going to be paying whatever your trade articles are. So then, when you're dealing with the zakat of money, not the zakat of bodies. When you're dealing with the zakat of money, you have 2 types, as you know. Zakat on the very money and zakat on the value of the money. That's where we are now. Zakat of the value of the money. Since we're dealing here with zakat on the value of the money, It means you're not going to be paying the money itself. You're going to be paying something else. Because this is zakat of the value. As for zakat of money, you're going to be paying the money itself. But in the case of camels, sometimes you're going to pay sheep and not camels. And sometimes you're going to pay camels. So besides camels, when it comes to zakat of money, you're going to pay whatever that money is. Cows, goats, raisins, etc. Gold, silver. In case of camels, sometimes it's going to pay camels too, and sometimes you're going to pay sheep. And in the case of traders zakat, you're not going to pay the money. You're going to pay something else. Gold or silver. This is Shafi'i school, not Hanafi school. So the author says, the quotum of zakat on trade articles is the quotum of gold or silver with which they were purchased. What's the quotum of gold or silver? If it's gold, it's 20 mithqals, the weight of 20 mithqals. If it's silver, it's the weight of 200 dirhams. The quotum of zakat on trade articles, the value of the trade articles, is the quotum of gold or silver. So if that value gets you 20 mithqals of gold, that's if you started with gold. If you started with gold and you have the value that gets you 20 mithqals of gold, or you started with silver and you have value that gets you 200 dirhams of silver, that's what it means, with which they were purchased. That's what you started with. Then, if you started with gold and you got the quotum, you're going to pay gold. If you started with silver and then you got the quotum, you're going to pay silver. What are you looking into to see if you got the quotum? You're looking into your inventory and your cash that you generated from this trade after a year. Your inventory plus any cash you generated from your trade, this trade in particular, after a year. So that means then if you're doing several things, you might need to keep records and keep your monies separated. This is not a bad practice. If you have access to different monies, keep them separated. You are in charge of some monies, keep your monies separated and keep good records, inshallah. Me too. So this is because zakat on trade articles is assessed on the basis of what they were purchased with. So you might have an immediate question: what if you used other than gold or silver? So there's an answer for that. But don't forget to learn the original things. This religion takes you back to the origin of things. So the origin is gold and silver. So then learn that. And then you'll see any detail that comes afterwards. Hence, if they were bought with gold, zakat is due if the trade article's market value has reached the gold zakat quota. That's what we said. And if they were bought with silver, zakat is due if the trade article's market value here means all of it sold at once. So that's what I meant in a previous lesson when I said wholesale. So maybe someone's concerned that if this is right, what I'm saying is right meaning of wholesale. So this is what I'm saying to you. All of the merchandise, all of the inventory sold all at once. How much are you going to get for it? So you're not going to sell all of it at once, unit by unit, every single unit inside the box. Once you get certain mass quantity, how are you going to move that? You're going to move it by selling wholesale. So the zakat is due if the trade article's market value has reached the silver zakat quotum, if you started with silver. And like I said to you, add to that any cash that you've generated from this trade. And what's the source of your trade? So here's a scenario for you. You got some money. So on Ramadan 1st, you took that money and you purchased something with the intention to sell it for a profit. So once you purchase that on Ramadan 1st, that's the source of your trade here. Now keep this money isolated. Now you bought your merchandise. Now you have your merchandise. Let's say you sell some of it. Now you got some cash generated here. Keep this merchandise and this cash يعني accounted for. And then this source right here, this merchandise and this cash, with this you buy more and you sell more and you buy more and you're generating money and you're buying more and selling more. So this chain here until the next year, look into that. What if you took some money, not from that first one, you got some new money, and then you bought some more merchandise? So then keep tabs on this one for a whole year. So, and if they were purchased with something other than gold or silver, they are valued based on what is mostly in circulation of gold or silver in his area. That's interesting there. His. That's interesting for this book. Yeah, had to put his because said they here for the money. They here means money, so they couldn't say their area, then it becomes confusing. So they said his. That's the pronoun that I would use in all those other spots. Okay. Consideration of the quotum is held off until the end of one lunar year. Said that already. Therefore, if trade goods reach the quotum, if their value could get you the quotum at the end of the year, zakat is due. Then you're going to pay gold for zakat or silver for zakat. Otherwise, it's not due. The amount due is 1/40th of the value of the trade articles. 1/40th of the value of the trade articles in gold or silver. This means the merchant offers gold if the trade articles were assessed in gold, or silver if they were assessed in silver. So that's done. And I'll offer you a detail. The detail I want to give you is, I told you when the year starts for you. What's the source of your zakat money in this case? When you purchase with the intent to sell it. The detail I want to give you is, what if you already had it? You already had it, so you didn't buy it. When I'm saying you didn't buy it that way, it means you already had it. For example, like you have furniture in your house, so you already had the furniture. But when you bought the furniture, you didn't buy it to sell it. But now you want to sell it. So then your year will start when you sell it. So let me repeat for you, inshallah. Your year will start when you purchase merchandise with the intent of selling it. But this merchandise that you want to sell, this merchandise you want to sell, not the money you bought it with, the merchandise itself. Your year will start when you sell it. You already had it and you didn't buy it for that reason. Or like you got it by dowry, for example. So when you got it, you made the intention to sell it. That was your dowry. So your year won't start until you sell it, in this case. Or you already had it, and then you decided you want to sell it. Then your year won't start until you sell it. So if you have a question, please ask. You said, when you mention any cash generated, does this mean since starting the trade or the amount that one currently has since starting the trade? Generated from the trade. Any cash generated from the trade. So you got some money, and with this money, you purchased some perfume. Then you sold some perfume. And what did you get? You got uh, some cash. And then you sold more perfume and you got some cash. And with this cash, you bought some more perfume too. And you sold it. And you got some cash. And you still had some old perfume too. And you sold that. And you got some cash. And with some of that cash, you bought some more perfume. So you have cash and you have perfume. This cash generated from your business, this trade. At the end of the year, you're going to see how much does my perfume cost on the market wholesale. And how much cash also have I generated from this trade? Can I get the quantum of gold or silver with it? If so, then you have to pay the zakat of gold and silver or silver. You said about the dowry. Didn't she have the intention to sell it? Yeah, but she didn't get it through normal exchange. That's my words I'm translating. Yani, what's the word in Arabic? Let me review it, inshallah. All right, so we finished talking about that. Now we want to talk about the zakat partners. The author says the mixed wealth of two or more persons is the same as the wealth of one person. So that means they're partners. In regards to the quotum and due zakat. So what if he bought them with today's currency? So it goes back to the rule right here. Here. And if they were purchased with something other than gold or silver, so that covers your question right there. They are valued based on what is mostly in circulation of gold and gold or silver in his area. One who needs to pay the zakat. In his area means his town. In his settlement. His settlement means the town he lives in, the cluster of buildings. You can follow up your question if you want to. He says the mixed wealth of two or more persons is the same as the wealth of one person in regards to the quotum and due zakat. So if the merger is enacted, yani, if these zakat partners put their monies together and the total wealth reaches the quotum of whatever that money is, animals or bullion or crops, all partners pay the zakat as if the owners of the combined wealth are a single person. And for this reason, sometimes this mixture will make paying zakat cheaper for you, and sometimes it will make it more expensive for you, and sometimes it will make it the same, like whether you had a partner or not. Because the minimum number of camels is 5. So if you had 2 and someone else had 3, and you all put your camels together and you fulfilled all the conditions, then now the 2 of you are going to have to pay a sheep. But had you kept your money separate, neither of you would have had to pay anything. So this mixing became more expensive as far as zakat is concerned. And like that, you can go. If you think of different scenarios, if you know the numbers and put some scenarios together, you'd say, in this case, it's cheaper for one and more expensive for the other. In this case, cheaper for both of them. In this case, it's more expensive for both of them. In this case, it's the same, whether they put their money together or not. This is true if the conditions for mixing wealth are met, yani, under all the right conditions here, which are learned from more comprehensive books. So we won't go further here or there in that topic. So if you took Abu Shuja' review, the zakat of fitr is obligatory upon every Muslim for himself and upon those whom he is obligated to support, if they are Muslims, provided that they lived through the last part of Ramadan, etc. Let me back up here. So now we finished talking about the zakat of money. Zakat of money, as you know, is 2 cases. Zakatul ayn, the zakat of the very money, on the very money, and zakatul qimah, the zakat on the value. Zakat on the very money, as you know, inshallah, you remember now, and maybe you can say it without looking at a book, is on animals and bullion and crops. And crops here means grains and fruits. When I say in English crops, that covers grains and fruits. That's one word in English that will cover both of those. Now, just reminding me how we say ghanam. That's one word, covers what? Sheep and goats. So the zakat on the very money is on animals and bullion, that's gold and silver. They have a word in Arabic for that, naqd. And crops, that's the fruits and the grains. And then the other category of the zakat of money is the zakat of the value. That's the zakat for the trader. Now we finished all of that. All of that is what? The zakat of money. Now the author wants to talk about the other type of zakat, the zakat of bodies. Or you could call it the zakat of fasting. The zakat of fasting. That's permissible. It's called zakat al-fitr. It is obligatory upon every Muslim. Yani, you know that means accountable one. Fulfills all the obligations, which fulfills all the conditions, which the conditions are coming. So each individual is going to do that. Unless that one is under someone else's obligatory support. Now that I think about it, maybe a good word here is due as opposed to obligatory. The zakat of fitr is due on every Muslim because it is due on the money of the child, even though the child's not accountable. It's due. The zakat of fitr is due on every Muslim. Each one has to pay. Unless this one is under someone's obligatory support. Then the one who's obligated to support him is the one who's going to produce the zakat on his behalf. So if you had a rich child and you are the guardian in charge of this child's money, then you have to handle this money. So you're going to take the zakat out of that child's money and pay it. That's the Shafi'i school. And it's not only for zakat al-fitr. So that's actually is something we might want to consider here in the chapter of zakat in particular. In terms of the translation, because maybe someone's not going to understand something here. The way it's worded is the zakat of fitr is obligatory upon every Muslim. That's why the first way I said it, I said if he's accountable, because this word obligatory threw me there. The zakat of fitr is due on every Muslim for himself and upon those whom he is obligated to support. If they are Muslims. So he has to pay for himself, yani, he has to produce the fitr for his own body or for his own person. And if he's obligated to support some Muslims, then for each Muslim he's obligated to support, he has to produce zakat also on their behalf. Provided that they lived through the last part of Ramadan. Which means that they were alive through sunset of the last day of Ramadan and the first part of Shawwal. In other words, their life must remain through the space of time previously mentioned. Not under the final throes due to the departure of the soul. Therefore, if someone dies before sunset or is born afterwards, it is not an obligation to pay zakat for them. Nah. So, look at this last sentence here. This last sentence here, this is the rule. It goes here. If someone dies before sunset or is born afterwards, it's not an obligation to pay zakat for it. that one. So if we say the rule this way, maybe you'll be confused. You're not sure how to take that. If someone dies before sunset at the end of Ramadan, or he's born after that, it's not an obligation to pay zakat for him. Or you might find it clear. I find it clear personally. This rule, you can say it another way, which is what he said first. Provided that they lived through the last part of Ramadan and the first part of Shawwal, provided that they lived through the last day of Ramadan and into the first day of Shawwal. So it says live here. And what this means is, provided that this person was obligated to provide for this other one during that time. This one was obligated to provide for that one during that time. That might be a better word. So to include the wife. So if you think about a baby, for example, what if the baby died before the sunset of Ramadan? Then you don't have to pay the zakat. Or what if the wife died? Then you don't have to pay the zakat for her. What if what if he didn't marry her though until the Eid? She became his wife on the Eid, or the baby was born on the Eid. Then you don't have to pay zakat for this wife or for this baby. So that's the meaning here. That this one is obligated to provide for that one at this time, before Ramadan ends and after Eid comes in. This time here. If a person is obligated to provide for a person for this span, before Ramadan ends and after the Eid comes in at nighttime. Ramadan ends at nighttime. Then he has to pay the zakat. So therefore, if someone dies before sunset or is born afterwards, it is not an obligation to pay zakat for them. Yani, or he marries her afterwards. Or, yani, I won't go into more scenarios. And it is obligatory on the Muslim only if he possesses a surplus beyond that which covers his debts. So one condition for him to be obligated to pay this zakat of fasting, which is the zakat of bodies, is that he has not only the money to provide for his dependents, but he also has enough money to pay his debts, even the debts that aren't due yet. So he has enough money to provide for his dependents. And he has enough money for his debts even if they're not due. Like, imagine if they were due. How much money would you need? And his clothing is suitable for himself and for his dependents. It says for both the breadwinner and those he's obligated to support. And his lodging is suitable for him and his dependents. His sustenance and his sustenance of those whom he must support, such as his wife, his young children, and his poor parents, and also his Muslim slaves. His wife means here his Muslim wife. His young children, his poor parents, yani Muslim parents. So if someone has a mortgage on a house and it's more than what he doesn't pay. If it's a valid debt, then goes under this rule. You said mortgage. I'm answering by saying if it's a valid debt, a valid debt. And all this money we're talking about right now, enough money for basically all his needs, his sustenance, and enough money for all his dependents. And if his debts were due right now, he has that much money too. And important to add, he has enough money for sweets on the Eid, even the sweets for the Eid. He has that much money, and he has more. Then he's going to be wait for the day of Eid. He has that much money for the day of Eid, not the night before, not the night before the Eid. The daytime of Eid, day of Eid here means the daytime of Eid and the night that's after it. So he has that much money for the Eid day and the night after it. Then he's going to have to pay his zakat. The due zakat for each free individual it says, the due zakat for each free individual is a saw of the most common staple crop of that area. So I'm not sure why the word free is here. A slave wouldn't own anything so that he would have to even pay any zakat, so it's not included here. You don't have to say the one who's paying is free, because he would only be free. Unless they want to include the mukatab slave. The mukatab slave doesn't have zakatul fitr, even though he has some money. So maybe that's why free is there. Otherwise, zakat is due on So I also find in the chapter of zakat that the use of some some prepositions are potentially confusing. On, for, and some other ones maybe. So let me read what's here. It says the due zakat for each free individual is a saw. So if we talk about the free individuals, we must mean who's paying, not who's being paid for. We must mean here who's paying. So each individual who's paying has to pay a saw of the most common staple crop of the area. But then there's something that's not straight here. But if you want to talk about who's being paid for, that includes slaves. If you have Muslim slaves, you have to include them. That's why this is confusing. So then the word for here doesn't work. The due zakat for each free individual. So, yeah, it looks like what this is supposed to be saying is the due zakat on each individual is to pay, and each individual who has to pay zakat, or let me just say what the rule is. The due zakat on each individual who has to pay zakat is one saw per body. One saw per body. This sentence doesn't mean that. One saw per body. So here's your scenarios. A single man and a single woman, a bachelor and a bachelorette. They both have money. They fulfill all the conditions. He pays his zakat al-fitr for his own person. She pays for her own person. Then they get married, and he supports her. So now he pays two, and she doesn't pay any. Then she gave him a beautiful Muslim baby. So now he pays triple. Unless this baby had money. Maybe this baby got some money from an inheritance. Now he's not obligated to support this baby from his own money. It would be permissible for him to support this baby from the baby's money. And as the baby's guardian, he's in charge of this baby's money, so he's going to produce the zakat for that baby's person from the baby's money. And then his parents got poor, his two Muslim parents. So then he's going to pay two more. Then he got a Muslim slave. Then he's going to pay another one. One saw per body. This sentence doesn't mean that. It says the due zakat for each free individual is a saw. So unless that means the free individual is paying for himself, not considering his dependent, then he's just going to pay a saw of the most common staple crop of that area. So you have to learn from teachers. Don't learn from reading books. The most common staple crop is wheat in countries such as Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Egypt. So Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, that's the Levant, and Egypt, and rice in parts of India and Indonesia, and corn in parts of Ethiopia, and others in other countries. Maybe there's some things you don't even know about. You have no idea about. Maybe a traveling scholar one day will go to some land and he encounters some people he never even heard of, nobody knew about. And then he teaches them Islam and they embrace Islam and they have something that fulfills these conditions. You never even knew about it. Then they're going to have to pay the zakat for this. He pays one saw for himself, yes, and one saw for each those he's obligated to support, yes, as has been described. So, unless there's something here that I'm missing, then looks like this sentence needs something. It is forbidden to delay payment beyond sunset of the day of Eid without an excuse. You have to pay that zakat before the sun goes down on the day of Eid, or else you missed the time. Then it's like you missed your prayer without an excuse. Major sin. The author says the intention in the heart to pay zakat is necessary for every type of zakat. Just like all the worships, the intention is needed. Intention is needed for worships, is required for worships. It's a condition for the validity of the worship, the intention. And the intention is not a condition for a deal. Even an obligation that a deal is incorporated into that obligation, like when you, for example, if you gave your wife her clothing that she deserves, and you gave her her food that she deserves, just by doing that, you fulfilled your obligation without an intention. If you forgot to make your intention, you fulfilled the obligation, but you didn't get reward. But the worships require an intention for the validity in the first place. And zakat is no different. It is sufficient to have this intention upon apportioning the amount to be paid as zakat. That means when you separate your zakat money from the rest of your zakat, then this is, if you make an intention here, then this is valid. Just like if you made the intention for wudu when the water first touches your face. And if you made the intention for prayer when you say Allahu Akbar. Like in your heart to say, I intend this to be the obligatory zakat on what I own. Or this is the obligatory charity on what I own. You can call zakat sadaqah. Sadaqah means charity, but here it's an obligatory one, not an optional one. Or if you were paying zakatul fitr, you could say in your heart, this is the zakat on my person. Or this is my fasting zakat. So this is the zakat that I must pay for the bodies that I support. Or anything like that. The act of apportioning means to isolate the amount one wants to pay as zakat from the rest of his wealth. That's clear, inshallah ta'ala. It is an obligation to pay zakat to 8 categories of beneficiaries, recipients, that were cited by Allah in the Holy Book. Yani, zakat is paid to 8 types of people. They are mentioned in the Quran. The zakat is exclusively paid to the following beneficiaries because of the ayah. The ayah starts with the word innama. Innama is for limitation. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. This means the charities are merely paid to these ones that we're going to mention now. All the ones that are mentioned in the ayah are coming right now, in the order they're mentioned in the ayah. The zakat is exclusively paid to the following beneficiaries that are present in the area in which the zakat funds exist. Yani, the zakat funds are for their town. Each town has its own zakat funds. So, like we mentioned before, if you don't find anyone who's eligible for zakat, what do? Do you panic and get confused and scratch your head? Or you just hold it? Just hold it, that's all. So easy. These 8 are: 1, the destitute people. Al-Fuqara. Destitute means very poor. I usually say impoverished. This is good too. The destitute person is someone who does not have a sponsor who is Islamically required to support him and only acquires less than half of his basic needs. Daily needs. Such as someone who needs 10 and finds only 4 per day on any given day. You could be poor one day and rich the next day. When does your wealth or poverty start? Yani, how do you gauge it? How do you At what time do you gauge that you're wealthy on this day or poor on this day? At Fajr time. Fajr time. So if you're rich at Fajr time, then you're rich for that day. If you're poor on at Fajr time, then you're poor for that day. That's the rule. If you were poor at Fajr time and then you got rich in the middle of the day, you're going to be counted as a poor man until the next Fajr. When the next Fajr comes and you still have that money, then you're a rich man for that day. Or woman, of course. Such as someone who needs 10 per day and only finds 4. Yani, he finds less than half of his daily needs. The poor people, al-masakin. The poor person is someone that has some of what is sufficient for his subsistence, but does not find all of what would fulfill the appropriate needs for his situation. Such as someone who needs 10 but only finds 8. So that's the poor person. So the poor person, the miskin, finds less than all of his daily needs, but more than half. And the faqir, the impoverished or destitute person, finds not even half of his daily needs. So what would the caliph do for this person? The caliph would look into this person's situation. If he has a skill, like he knows a trade, then the caliph will give him enough money to start his own business so that he can be independent from there. If this one can't work, like he's crippled and cannot work, then the caliph will purchase for him real estate and then rent it out so that it generates money for this person, so that this person can become independent. And if this one were a senior citizen, then the caliph will give this one enough money for a year. And if he's still alive, then and he's still poor, then the caliph will give him enough money for another year. So those are 2 out of 8. The third one is the zakat workers. Al-amiluna alayha. The zakat workers are those whom the imam employed to collect zakat from the donors and to distribute it to those entitled to receive it and to perform other related tasks. So from here, you know that the caliph would have a zakat department. He's going to have collectors and distributors. Collectors means going around the town, going from door to door, for example, or according to whatever their records show, so that they can collect the zakat from those who need to pay. And so to distribute zakat, yani he has workers to distribute the zakat, and also he has other related workers, accountants, and uh, people who weigh, and those types of things, whatever is needed there. Imam here means caliph. So the zakat workers are those whom the caliph employed to collect zakat from the donors and to distribute it to those entitled to receive it and to perform other related tasks. This only applies if the imam does not allocate a salary to the zakat workers from the Muslim treasury. So the caliphate appointed zakat workers. If they don't take a salary, then they are eligible for zakat. The ones those those whose hearts are to be reconciled. Al-mu'allafatu qulubuhum. This category of beneficiaries is inclusive of various groups. Yani, those whose hearts need reconciliation are different types, such as those who are unbelievers and then embraced Islam without yet becoming close to the Muslims, meaning they still feel alienated from the Muslims. They don't feel like they are with the Muslims yet, but they are Muslims. So they are given some zakat to strengthen their commitment to Islam. And there's other types, including those who are on the borders with the enemy. Those who live on the borders with the enemies. The Muslims who live at the borders, which that's a dangerous place, hostile or potentially hostile place. So those Muslims have to be on alert always, ready to fight. So the Caliph has a choice. Either he will reinforce them with troops to guard the border, or he will give them zakat so that they can uh, take care of their own situation there. He doesn't want to give them an army. The slaves in a contract of emancipation, what some call self-purchase contract. Al-Riqab, this word Al-Riqab by itself just means slaves. What's meant here are the slaves who have done the self-purchase contract with their masters. They are people in bondage. Bondage here means slavery. Who have a valid emancipation contract. It's a condition that that contract is valid. I.e., they have an arrangement with their owners that if they pay a specific amount of money, they will be freed. They become freemen. Such slaves receive zakat money to help them gain their freedom. Because Islam encourages the freeing of slaves, the emancipation of slaves. Islam does not abolish slavery, but it does encourage the emancipation of slaves. It's a good deed. So that's moderate. That's moderate, means in the middle. Neither abolishing slavery nor yani, nor refusing to free them. The insolvent debtors, al-gharimun, yani those who are in debt, they have debt. Insolvent means they don't have money to pay their debts. I.e., those who received a loan to be spent in a lawful way, then were unable to repay the debt at its time of maturity. So they are, as it might be said, they're in the hole. They don't have enough money to pay their due debts. Or those who borrowed money to spend unlawfully but have repented and found themselves unable to repay. They can get zakat also. And amongst the scenarios that the scholars mention here are those who pay blood money to thwart a feud. That means to stop a family feud. Like someone was found dead. Now the family of the dead wants revenge and they're ready to go to war with the other family or with another family, for example. So then a Muslim comes, he says, wait, stands in the middle there, puts his arms out and says, wait, I'll pay his blood money. And then he goes and takes a loan to pay the blood money, gives it to the people of Yani, the family of the dead one. He stops this feud because of what he did, and now he's in debt. So he can get zakat so that he can pay his debt back. Now, that case is like other cases of having a debt, but the scenario is mentioned as an encouragement for someone to do such good deeds, to take on such, to take on debts for such good deeds. The volunteer warriors. Nice. We usually say volunteer fighters. They said volunteer warriors. That's a nice one. Fi sabilillah, even if they are well off, even if they aren't poor, they are given what they need for battle, contrary to those who are on the payroll of the registry of soldiers. Meaning they're not part of the army reserve, the Muslim army reserve, getting a salary ready to be called out to war at any time. Rather, they are, if you want, civilians. And they want to go with the army to fight. That's something the Muslims do. The Muslims will go out for war, and then there would be, if you want, civilians. They want to join the battle, so they go. And then Muslims don't stop them. And then even sometimes, who goes with them? Some of the traders even go with them. And they will set up their tables around the base. So those fighters, they need some money so that they can get weapons and ride and armor and even maybe have money for food while they're out. In this case, it's not a condition that the recipient is poor. It does not mean here every philanthropic deed. It does not mean here every or any philanthropic deed. Philanthropy, that means like building a school for the sake of God, or a cemetery, or a hospital, or digging a well for a village, or like that. So zakat money is not paid for any philanthropic deed. That's a misinterpretation of fi sabilillah. One scholar, he's a Hanafi if I'm not mistaken, he said what we are saying here. That's wrong. He said the wrong thing they were saying here. And that one is a notable scholar from a long time ago. It's a notable time ago. And today, there are people who take that wrong saying. And not even because they took it from that scholar, but because they were ignorant. And then they just said, Fi sabilillah. For the sake of Allah. It doesn't mean, it's not that open here. Fi sabilillah means the volunteer warriors. There's a lot of documentation about that. Hence, it is not permissible to pay zakat to build a hospital, a mosque, or a school under the pretext that it is an act of charity subsumed under the category fi sabilillah. Never saw this word before, subsumed. Because it has been established that what is meant by fi sabilillah in the Quran is what we have previously mentioned, volunteer fighters. Zakat is also spent on the traveler or the person who wants to travel who does not possess sufficient funds to reach his destination. So a person is stranded and he happens to be in a town that has zakat funds, Muslim of course. Then it's permissible for this Muslim from another town to take zakat from the zakat funds of the town he's in so that he can get home. Even if he's rich at home, but he doesn't have his money with him. Or a Muslim in the town of the zakat wants to embark on a journey, even if it's not an emergency. It could be Hajj or it could be something other than that. Then he can get zakat money to take his trip, to fund his trip. That's permissible. It's valid. The caliph will have shares for all these categories. The caliph will divide the monies up as they should be divided. And he will give poor people from the share of the poor. And he will give the slaves from the share of the slaves, etc. And the one who needs to travel, he will give him from that share. That's the caliph. Now, if you are just a Muslim who needs to pay a zakat, you can give your zakat to any of these types. In fact, according to Imam Al-Shafi'i, if you can afford it, you have to give zakat to all 8 types. If you have enough zakat money to pay to every type, then it means you have to pay someone who's faqir, someone who's miskeen, someone who's a zakat worker appointed by the caliph, etc., etc. Someone who's in debt, someone who's a slave trying to buy his freedom. You're going to split your zakat payment up amongst all of them. Not only that, according to Ash-Shafi'i, if you have enough money, you even have to pay 3 of each type, except the zakat worker. So when you don't have that much money, then when you pay zakat, you're just used to finding some Muslim and giving him your money. Finding a poor Muslim and giving him whatever is your zakat money. But if you did have that much money and you're following the Shafi'i school, then remember you need to pay, according to him, all 8 types and 3 people from each type except the zakat worker. Could be 1. Therefore, they are given zakat money that will suffice them if their journey is permissible, even if they travel for leisure. That's right. It is neither permissible nor valid to pay zakat to other than these 8 categories of people who are entitled to it. These are the 8 categories that Allah mentioned in the Quran. I already recited the ayah for you. Furthermore, it is only paid to them on the condition that they are Muslims who are not descendants of Hashim or Al-Muttalib. The clans of Hashim and Al-Muttalib do not take zakat money, but they do take war spoils. Not for being part of the war, not for being part of the army, just for being from the clan of Hashim or Al-Muttalib. They get war spoils. There's a share of the war spoils for the clans of Hashim and Al-Muttalib, and there's no share of zakat for them. As for the Hashemites and the Muttalibites, it is not permissible for them to take zakat even if they were poor. Wallahu a'lam. We'll stop there. So we finished that. We finished the zakat, and we'll then keep it brief for today, insha'Allah ta'ala. We'll start fasting next week if Allah enables us. Do you have a question I can answer for you?
Shaykh,
Yes.
going back to the first category, the fuqara and masakin, you mentioned that the caliph could assist them if he was a tradesperson. In what way? Or if he knew trade, you said?
The caliph can assist him if he has a skill. Then the caliph will give him enough money to start a business.
To start a business. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Like he might be a trader. That might be his skill. Or he might be a carpenter. So then the caliph will give him enough money to start a business.
Okay.
To start his own business. Amin wafiq. The zakat goes to the town, not the country, just the town. Town by town. But we're not going to say revert, though. We're going to say convert. Converts. You said if a person forgot to pay zakat for past Eid, what do? He pays it. It's just like making up a prayer. He has to make up his zakat. Or just like making up fasting. He has to make up his fasting. He has to make up his zakat. No, they just make it up. Just like how you have to make up a prayer or make up fasting. He doesn't have to do something extra. On the topic of this revert thing, I was talking to a person recently. And so somebody told me this brother here has some misunderstanding about the issue. So we talked. And he told me he'll check on what I told him. But I told him it's consensus of all the scholars, the consensus that if a person is born to non-Muslim parents, then he's not a Muslim, it's kafir baby. So he said, no. He said, I studied in Al-Azhar. I told him, okay, then you should know from all the fiqh books. It's in all the books of fiqh. It's a consensus that if someone is born to non-Muslim parents, he's not a Muslim. The baby is non-Muslim. So that means he's going to be a convert, not revert, convert. So I talked to him a little bit, and he said, okay, I'll check. I'll look into it. But later, after I talked to him, there was something that I remembered that I could have said to him. I didn't remember it at the time. Because he said he studied. So if a person studied fiqh traditionally, that means then he should have taken the chapter of jihad. That's one of the fiqh chapters, jihad. So in the jihad chapter, they talk about what's the judgment if you find if the Muslim soldier captures a child away from his parents. If the Muslim soldier captures a child away from his parents, then that child's going to be judged as a Muslim. But if he captures the child with his parents, he's going to be judged as a kafir, the child, before he reaches puberty. So I'm saying all that to say to you, to everybody, Yani, be mindful here. So you want to say what's right. So what's right is that if you're born to at least one Muslim parent, then you're born as a Muslim. And if you're born to non-Muslim parents, both your parents are not Muslims, that means as a baby, you're not a Muslim. And you are still born on the fitrah. When the Prophet said, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ وُلِدَ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ, every newborn is born on the fitrah. That doesn't mean born as a Muslim. So just for your information. If you have any question about that, anyone want to ask me about that while we're here, feel free. So a question here says, if a person, I answered that. Also, if you don't know anyone who is a new revert, but someone who is a revert in the country, the zakat money stays in the zakat town. If you don't find anyone who is a recipient of the zakat in your town, then you just hold the money until you find one. Question. Also, if a person wants to pay according to Imam Ash-Shafi'i, could they go to one person to handle the payment on their behalf? What do you mean handle the payment on their behalf? Whose money is it? Are you asking me about? The fitrah is the readiness for the right belief. The fitrah is there's a word. It's a very good word. It's not coming to me. But basically means the readiness. The baby comes out not inclined to worship creation. If you teach that baby proper monotheism, then once that baby gets like 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, baby can understand things, not a baby anymore. And you told them that Allah doesn't resemble the creations, He doesn't have a shape or color, then this child is ready for this already, is already prepared to accept this. That's the fitrah. Doesn't mean he's a Muslim though. The money belongs to the person who needs to pay the zakat. Okay, so it's valid to give that zakat money to someone who will distribute it for you. But you have to believe that this person is trustworthy. Amin wa fikum. Fitrah is not a declaration. Declaration means some words that you say. Any other question?
Shaykh,
Yes.
on the last example, the last category there of the recipients, was it the one that you mentioned, the one who is a traveler and needs money to get to their destination?
Yes. Or he wants to travel.
And are there conditions around the travel?
It's not haram travel.
Okay, so like you said, even if they just wanted to travel for the purpose of visiting somebody, they could be
Yes.
given some money. Okay.
And before we go, why I stopped here to talk about this revert thing. Just to remind you, brothers and sisters, you want to be accurate in what you say always. Always want to be accurate. You don't want to say wrong things in religion. And this one about some people understand the hadith, which means every newborn is born on the fitrah. That's what the hadith says. Every newborn is born on the fitrah. They understand it to mean every newborn is born as a Muslim. That's not what it means. So that if you had a kafir child, like let's say two Christians had a baby, or two Jews had a baby, or some Buddhists had a baby, or people of any religion had a baby, yes, this baby is not accountable, but this baby is not a Muslim. If this baby died, you cannot bury this baby in the Muslim cemetery. It's not permissible to bury that baby in a Muslim cemetery. That's just an example for you. Here's a question. What about a child who is born from a kafir, but the kafir converts to Islam before the child becomes accountable? What would the child be considered? A Muslim. Then the child's going to be a Muslim by extension of the parent. What if the grandparents were Muslim, but the parents are kafirs? Then the child's a Muslim. Yeah, the fitrah is the readiness for right belief. Fitrah is the readiness for monotheism, correct monotheism. But it doesn't mean Muslim. Fitrah doesn't mean Muslim. Fitrah is a readiness. Maybe ready is the word. What if you, let's say, let me give you an analogy. Now we live in this time of technology. What if you had a smartphone? You bought a new smartphone. It's unlocked. Unlocked. That means you can put any SIM card in there and it's going to work, right? So it means it's just ready. It's ready for you to use it. Just put the SIM card in there. Any SIM card you want, you're going to be able to use the phone. It's ready. If it's locked, though, means not ready. It's not ready for anything. So that's just to maybe give you something to make an analogy for you. The child is ready for the monotheism. You have that little baby. When the baby comes out, he doesn't know anything. So then when the baby can understand, you tell that baby, Allah is not like anything. Allah is not a man. Allah is not a woman. Allah is not in a place. He doesn't have a shape or a form or a color. Then that baby or that child is going to be like, yes, Yanni's ready. It's going to go right in. By that same token, if someone told that baby, we worship Jesus, the baby's going to say, why? Because it's not ready for that. But then if he accepts it, then he's going to defy the fitrah with which he was created. Or if someone told that baby, this fire, we worship the fire. So that baby's going to say, the fire? What if we pour water on it? He's going to say, no, don't think like that. Or if you told that baby, we worship Allah, we worship the one who created all of the universe, and he's not like anything, then the baby's going to be ready for that. The child, I mean. It's going to accept it easily. It's already prepared for it. That doesn't mean he's a Muslim, though. But you're welcome. Do you have any other question? And when I'm saying what I'm saying here, I'm not telling you don't ask me or something like that. I'm not trying to get on anyone's case or put anyone on the spot. Just want to give you some correct information. If the parent embraces Islam while the child is below puberty, then the child will be a Muslim by extension of the parent. But if the parent embraces Islam after the child reaches puberty, then that child's going to need his own shahada after that. And the child only needs one Muslim parent to be a Muslim. If a Muslim man married a Christian or Jewish woman, his baby is a Muslim. If a Muslim woman somehow had a baby from a Kafir man, that baby is a Muslim. A Muslim born on the fitrah. And if some Kafirs had a baby, that baby is a Kafir, but Kafir born on the fitrah. That's the hadith. Every newborn is born on the fitrah. Barakallahu feekum.